Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Souter, and with me today is Skylar Fiction. Skylar, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Hello, everybody out there.
It's good. So I was saying before the show started. I think this is interesting because I've known who you are for at least a year or two, but no more than a year, 2 years, I mean, more than a year for sure. So I've known who you are for a couple of years, and but we seem to run sort of in concentric circles. Where it's sort of
Yeah,
I used to do modern day debates a lot, but I haven't done it in a while. You're on modern day debates, and I don't do a lot of debates. I've done maybe six or seven total. Andrew Stratilities on is there such a thing as objective morality? Da, 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 a number of them. Obviously, the SJ one, which is probably the one I'm most known for. But and then of course, I see you doing the debate, and every now and then I was like, I want to go talk to Skylar, and I try to catch up with you somewhere, and we just so.
oh
Good, to,
no.
good to finally. This is the first time we've actually been on a stream together. It's very nice to meet you.
Oh, dude, it's a pleasure to meet you too, man. Yeah, it's just exciting. It's weird because sometimes and I'm terrible with communication out there. People know because I'm terrible with writing people back on email. So yeah, no, this is fantastic, and I love to get to go on other shows and discuss different topics. Like this is especially tonight's topic, something I think very very important to me, and it's not something I get to talk about all the time.
Yeah. Well, and you had recommended just one of I guess it looked like you were doing a hangout. There were a lot of people there, and it turned into a debate between you and Vincent James, which I would definitely like to
Yeah.
talk about. I also just want to let everybody know if you like the show, please like and subscribe, and that really is a great way to help us out. I do try to keep up with all the chats. One way to immediately make sure that your chat's going to get read is a super chat. We certainly appreciate super chats. We will be dropping links to Skylar's channel uh, in the live chat, but it's also in the description if you want to check it out there. We have coming up on writing, where we will be discussing the drafting process, the entire hour. It's a call-in show. You want to come in and call, ask any questions about do I have to draft? Why do we draft? How do I get through the drafting process? It may leads into a um, uh, writer's block. Who knows? And then also, we are going to have on Anestis Georgiangelou. He is a Greek Orthodox minister, and he is going to be discussing the problem with religion, where he thinks organized religion gets it wrong, and why he thinks many or most religions are, in fact, a very serious problem. We'll be discussing that. We've also got generations theory coming up on the 30th, and then we're going to be discussing World War III. Who's it going to be with? A lot of people are starting to worry about China. Is it going to be China? Is it going to be Russia? Is it going to be the Middle East? What are the signs to look for? World War III was a trending hashtag was it last year or earlier this year? I don't know, during the Iraq thing. Well, we're going to talk about it. So, but right now we have on, and then we're going to do. I don't know, and I forgot to ask you this just in our pre-show hang, but we have a Discord. I'm going to be in there after the show. If you want to come join us, that would be great, and we can just do sort of an after-show hang. If not, we're all going to make fun of you for not showing up.
I think I can come by for a couple minutes. I don't think that'll be a problem.
All right. So, and we'll be dropping the Discord link in the description. So, Skylar, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us about your channel. Tell us about what you do, your hobbies, your real life. Let us know.
Yeah, I do the Skylar Fiction show on my channel, Skylar Fiction, with my co-host Dr. Josh Bowen from Digital Hammurabi. Yeah, we mostly do conversations about the Bible and theism. I like debating a lot. I've been focusing a lot more on politics recently, especially with the election coming up, because well, it's kind of important right now that people start paying attention and realize like the dangerous places that our country's going. And I just like to spend time with my family. I love my kids, love my wife. I love sci-fi. Star Trek. I'm a big fan of. Love listening to audiobooks, and then of course, my number one Lord and Savior, Raptor Jesus, RJ. So other than that, life is good, man. That's me in a nutshell, and I like a lot of humor, as far as you can probably tell.
Well, yeah. Well, good, good. It's going to be a good show, I think. Um,
Yes.
so the topic today is about when or how do you debate a racist, and I think that can also just sort of be expanded to any number of things. But did you? A lot of our viewers, and I certainly among them, used to watch the Non-Sequitur show, and there was one
Mhm.
very controversial episode. There was a couple controversial episodes, but one of them was where
Sure.
they had on a real neo-Nazi. Now, this guy isn't a poser. This guy wasn't, just this
Sure.
wasn't somebody pretending to be a flat. He really believed in this stuff, and he's reasonably famous. He's been around for a while. People recognize him and knew who he was. And a Black Lives Matter, and the neo it was to discuss slavery, and the neo-Nazi was basically making the argument that slavery isn't necessarily immoral. In some cases, it's actually good. It can be good for the slaves. Yeah, this was genuinely the argument. Now, did you see that
Yeah.
episode? Do you know that episode?
I don't think I did. I may have watched maybe a piece of it way back in the day, but I honestly do not remember it at all. I'm sorry.
That's no, well,
I'm
no, well.
terrible with YouTube.
What was unique about that episode? Actually, what
Yeah.
really here was what really freaked. This is it was going fine. Everything was going fine, and they were having this
Mhm.
discussion about slavery, and then the worst possible thing happened. The Black Lives Matter activist and the neo-Nazi agreed with each other, and then things got really, really bad. I am not kidding, because it turns out there was one thing on which they agreed. One issue on which they agreed.
Hmm.
Um, it was on. Oh my God! I can't believe I've spaced the term ethnostates. They agreed on ethnostates.
Ethno state.
They agreed that this country should be divided into roughly 12 subcountries based on race. And they agreed on that more than they disagreed on anything else. So they suddenly became kind of friends. And they started like really engaging on, hey, you agree? I do too. Oh man, I can totally respect you now. And they started to get along really well. But the hosts weren't prepared for that. And it completely derailed. And then the host tried to push back on that, but they were both well practiced in this argument. They knew the literature. They could cite works by people who said ethnostates are a good idea. So one of the hosts said, well, the problem is we need multiculturalism. And they just laughed. They're like, oh my God, he's quoting this guy. Yeah, I got this argument. Do you want to use the argument or should I? No, you do it, man. You go do you. And the two of them ganged up on the hosts in a way that they weren't actually prepared for at the time. So
Wow.
it became a nightmare just because nobody really could have seen that coming. But this led into the question, should they have been platformed and should they have been? So we talk a lot about platforming uh, in
Yeah.
general. But I think whenever you are talking to somebody who has a repulsive ideology, you're taking a risk. And in this case, I think they were
Mhm.
prepared until, again, the two people actually agreed on an even more repulsive ideology, and then there was a problem.
Yeah.
So, uh, what do you think? Do you think there's a responsibility to concern yourself with that? How much of a responsibility? How do you try to mitigate that? Is that something you worry about when you go on other
Hmm.
channels and or bring someone to yours?
That's an interesting question, right? So there's a part of me that is a completely free speech kind of guy in a sense, where I'm just like, I think we speech should be open and we should debate any topic out in the open, and no matter how tough it is. But I also think there's a part of me that you should probably do it responsibly, right? Like if you're going to bring somebody onto a platform that's very popular, um, you should be able to make them, especially if it's something like racism. Like for me, like if I'm going to bring a racist on my channel, first of all, I already have no respect for them. Like I'm not going to treat them very well, to be frank with you. My intention most of the time, if I know they're a blatant racist, is I'm going to try to make them look really bad, right? But not in a way that's dishonest, like in a way that they themselves expose themselves for what they are. What I typically find, like for instance, this guy that came on the other night, I had no clue who he really was, right? Somebody I had spoken, funny enough, 2 nights before, this guy who was an ethno state type person from Germany. Uh, And I thought he was trolling me at first because he came in with this thick German accent, and I was like, "Why?" Like he sounded like something out of like Inglorious Bastards, like a cliche Nazi type like voice. And I'm like, am I getting trolled? But as I'm listening to him, I'm like, no, no, he's not trolling me. This is for real. Like he knows his stuff. He's actually saying the type of stuff that these guys say. And I was able to just kind of like I start talking to him, and I start kind of like picking through, right? Because what I'm finding is, first of all, these guys aren't honest enough to just come out and say it, right? Most of them will like use language that isn't necessarily matching what they really feel and what they really say. They're trying to just push other narratives instead of just straight up coming out and saying, yeah, I'm a racist. I don't like whatever, for whatever reason, black people, whatever race of people.
Yeah.
So I find that you can quickly, if you start kind of just picking at things, and you're like, well, let's get a little deeper. Help me understand like why you want to talk about this, right? Instead of letting them go right into some kind of race statistic crime data or something like that. Like, let's find out why you want to talk about it. Like, what's the solution for it? See how much interest they have in any of these things, right? But with this guy, Vincent James, this guy, well, I guess he was friends with Vincent after I ended up calling this guy a full-blown racist, this German dude. He admitted to being a racist. He actually, at one point, said, yeah, you would call me a racist. He didn't say he was a racist. He just said I would call him
You
one.
would call, yeah, well, yeah.
It's the clever little, like, just not quite admitting it, but saying it in another way. Well, after I kind of, like, really took him to task, a couple days later, I did another open hangout, and he starts, like, in the chat. He's like, hey, Vincent James wants to debate you. And some of the other people in the room are like, hey, you should do that. He's a pretty big guy in these, like, like, right-wing, like, race groups. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is. I did a quick Google search. I saw he was on, like, Michelle Malkin's channel and these, like, far right-wing extremists. And he comes in the room, and instantly, like, I could just tell he had a narrative he wanted to spin, but I wasn't
Mhm.
going to allow him to do it, right? And sorry, this is a long way to get to this, but what I'm saying is like,
Dude, I
with
can go
that,
toe to toe with you on just blabbing for 20 minutes. Yeah, listen. Okay, wait a minute. You and I started. This with
yeah,
talking about names and what my name
yeah,
is, and it took me
yeah,
5-10 minutes to answer. Tell me I'm wrong. That we with the whole Nicholas Lamar Soutter. That was 5 or 10 minutes to answer
yeah.
your question on what to call me. So believe me, I feel you, brother. You and I are totally in this together. Please finish.
No. Yeah, and so what I found is what's going on now is this new, like, what I call Trumplicans, right? Because I consider
Ooh,
myself
yeah.
pretty a political centrist, probably on like I don't really consider this modern day Trumplicans, the people who follow Trump, to be conservatives or old school conservatives, right? In any way. Um, and what they do is they hide behind that and say that they're conservative and Republican, or that they're for less government. But ask them a couple questions, right? You start figuring out, hey, let's talk about trickle down economics. Let's start talking about policy that Trump is doing that's not related to immigration or like race issues, and you quickly find out they don't know anything. They have no clue about what's going on, right? And I was able to
Yep.
expose that and be like, oh, so you're not really a conservative. Really, what you're a right wing social justice warrior, is all this is. That just focuses on immigration and
Mhm.
race issues. And you're doing this under the banner, and so you don't have to be full blown racist. So my thing is that if you're going to bring these people on your channel, know that you can beat them, right? Don't let them get the opportunity to pull one over on you, right? If you're not a good debater and you don't have the knowledge and the information that is required to be able to counter their arguments, don't do that, because you look bad, they look good. It makes it look like they want to debate, and now all they're going to do is they have more videos to feed off of and to feed
Yep.
their audience, basically. So yeah, I think part of it is just like, how are you going to deal with that responsibly? I think just interview them isn't necessarily a good idea. Like, if you're just like an interview show and you're like, let me interview a neo-Nazi this week and just to get their opinion, no. Like, I would definitely recommend that kind of platform, right? Like, I just want to get interesting points of view. No, like, you should challenge the ideas of it. Yeah, I think that's generally what it is. But I am a pretty big arguing free speech in the sense of like, I don't think we should. It's if we don't get it out in the open, it's going to go underground, in my opinion.
Yes, 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 I
Uh,
agree.
and I think it's safer just to mock these folks, make the show show it's like the king without his clothing, man. Show them for what they are, uh, and you end up like I think spreading more of a message than they ever could, in my opinion.
I tend to agree. I think that's actually one reason why I like the fact that the KKK can have a rally anytime they want. It's because then I know where the assholes
Mm-hmm.
are and roughly how many of them there are, and with any luck, I know who they are if they'll take off but they usually won't. But at any rate,
Absolutely.
there was something you had said. There was a couple of things you had said that I wanted to follow up on. One is though, so I do, because I do want to get into what happened with Vincent Jones, but the I try to, when I'm having a discussion, and it can be very difficult, but you try to, first of all, you don't want to get belligerent with them, because if you do, that's what they use and say, okay, all
Mhm.
liberals are, you see, he wasn't letting me make my points because he's afraid of them. So
Sure.
I think you're absolutely, it's not just having the knowledge, but it's having the experience to be able to engage with them. And I think that's something you can't judge until you've started your way down
Mhm.
and work your way up. But it's interesting because you were talking about, they won't come out and say they're racist. It's been my experience that most of them don't think they're racist because it's, quote, only racist if it's not
It's true.
true. Yeah. And since they all think it's true, so you can get the most racist Nazi you can find, and he will genuinely say to you, and believe it, he'll pass a lie detector. I'm not racist. Because in his view, racist is holding unreasonable or unfounded beliefs about another race, and theirs are, of course, completely founded. So I
Yes.
don't know. Is that you just said? He wouldn't. I'm sitting there going like,
No,
I've never met anyone who would.
that
On occasion they'll say it, but yeah.
that's a good point. I think you're right. And also, what I've noticed is they all of a sudden they feel people are being racist against them, like they're the victims now
Ooh,
somehow. And it's
yeah.
quite hilarious to me, where I'm like, you are not a victim. Like I can tell you like little things that like just so my tone changed at one point during the show. Because I really, at first, I was like, well, let me be fair. I was fair the whole time, but I was like, let me just, I'll do traditional debating. I'll just get them on substance and every type of, issue. And that's why I was trying to stay away from him just quoting dumb race statistics so out of context, right? Um, but then there was a part where he starts talking about black culture. He's like, well, it's black culture that's the problem. And I'm like, what do you even know about black culture, right? Like that's one thing
Yeah,
that always
yeah,
cracks me
yeah.
up is when I hear people like as if you're part of it, right? And I'm like, well, tell me a little. And he's like, why are you asking me that? Like he got all defensive all of a sudden. Because I think it's like when you see those kind of answers, you know right away. Oh, you don't know. You're not around black people. You don't have black friends. Most likely, you'll say you have black friends, but really you have black people that agree with you, right, on far
Mhm.
right wing policies, most likely, and that uh, don't necessarily, because they don't, like you said, they don't think they're racist, right? They'll say they'll say maybe they're prejudice isn't the right word. Maybe they discriminate against a certain culture because they don't like that particular culture, but then they associate a particular culture as if that culture is all of every single black person. Um, but once I figured out the game, like for instance, at the end of the show, right when he invited his fans, when his fans showed up, which he sent a link out, all of a sudden the chat changed, right, and
Mm,
then it was just constant like Jew, like pictures of like racist imagery. My mods couldn't even keep up. Like
yeah, yeah.
we couldn't even delete the comments quick enough in there. And I was like, Vincent, I was like, we're talking about like racism here, and I guess you don't feel it's a problem, but I mean, look at what you brought to the show. I was like, I was like, what? Denounce this. Go ahead and just denounce these comments. And he's like, nah, no, they can say what they want. I'm like, okay, you just played your card now. Like this just shows. Like I denounce shit all the time. Like people say stuff that when I get stuff in the audience, even though I think it's people not necessarily doing intentional things sometimes with my audience, but I've had fans of mine say stuff, and I'm like, oh, like we're not playing that game, and I'll call that stuff out right away, right? But the fact he was like not willing to do it, and then the comment section, my lord, my friend, my lord, I have never. I don't know why they think I'm going to be upset by calling me Jewish. Like, I don't have no problem with Jewish people. Like, I'm just like, you know what I kept doing? This is what's so funny,
Yeah,
Nick,
yeah.
is I went, so every time I was like, why do you keep calling me Jewish? I was like, just be honest. Tell me what it is about being Jewish. And like, I want to understand, like, what you're upset about, right? And not one of them could tell you. They're too afraid. They were so afraid, just openly, even though it's BS accounts
Yep,
without their
yep.
images, with no, like, they still couldn't be honest about all of their racism. It's
Well,
insanity.
the same thing happened when you brought up your wife, which was because he was just
Yeah,
like, oh, you're married to a black woman. Oh, congratulations. And I was just like,
exactly.
oh, oh,
That's when the tone changed. That was
yeah.
really when I
I
changed my
I
tone towards them.
I
And I
noticed.
was like, really?
I
Now you're losing my
noticed.
respect? Yeah.
I would have
And
too.
yeah, that Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you got. I should have sent you a link to this one too. There was another debate I had. It kind of all started on modern day debates. I had a debate with a guy named Justin Hermes. You familiar with him? He 7 Day Adventist, but he's also like really into the race politics. He's a black man, ironically here. And
Yeah,
I
no, no,
say
no.
that because, but let me explain for any audience out there. If you guys aren't familiar with Justin, I had a debate with him, a modern day debate. Uh, I did. I felt I did very well. I came with tons of data. He had nothing but FBI crime statistics, like every other person that does these right wing talking points about black people. But he's a black man. All right. His channel
Okay.
is literally video after video after video of black people beating up white people. That's all it is, and him commenting about how bad black people are to white people. And he to me, like, I was just in shock because he doesn't realize like what propaganda that is, first of all, and what damage that does to mentality, especially scared white folk out there, right? Like, you're only scaring them more, but people who may not be around black culture very often are black people, living in maybe somewhere like Iowa or something. Like, this is terrible for perception, and you're literally continuing a stereotype that I don't feel is based in reality, right? We could do this. I mean, literally, this kind of BS you could do with like mass shooters, right? I could focus show after show on mass shooters being white men and be like, look what white men are doing. Look at all these mass shootings white men are doing all over the country. But is that really reflective of white men, right? Like, is it really, like, is that helpful? Does that get to the root of these problems? So
Well, and the
it's
vast
just
majority
dangerous.
of the
And yeah,
I mean, if you hear that there's a mass shooting in the United States, there are a few things that you can probably guess about the suspect right off the bat before you're told anything. It's probably going to be male. First of all, haven't had very many female mass shooters.
yep.
It's actually happened, but it's very, very rare, and it's probably going to be a white guy. Usually middle-aged, not always, but usually. What I'm going to do right now, just FYI. So we've been talking about the debate with Vincent James. I'm going to drop the link to that in the chat because a few people have asked for it. And there is a timestamp in the description as to when that debate started. It started as a hangout, right? So it was a hangout, and then he came
Yeah.
in, and it
It's,
kind of
yeah,
turned
it's
into.
just long, it's like 3 hours. Yeah. Yeah, you can just click on that time step right in the description. That will bring you right to when it starts. So, yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, I was doing, I didn't think that was going to happen, but he came in and we debated still, like, I think it was an hour and a half we were going, and then he came in and we did another hour and a half. It was nuts.
Well, so here's the
Yeah,
problem.
he's,
Yeah, yeah.
mhm.
Well, so
Oh,
so
okay.
to the human mind, all news is local. And we actually evolved this way. So we evolved such that you basically never knew what was happening in the village next to you until somebody from that village eventually showed up and said, okay, by the way, this is what's happening. And if it was something really big, they'd tell you, okay, there's disease in the village, so on and so forth. Well, it's in the village next to you, and somebody just showed up. So there's a a possibility of so it's actually important, but you don't know what's happening on other continents. You may not even know what other continents are up until a few thousand years ago. So we evolved with this. If we understand any kind of news, we get triggered by it as if it's happening next to us because it is happening next to us. And I've got
Mm.
oh dear Lord, Stephen Steen, one
He's a
one
friend
nine.
of mine. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Oh, I know him. I know him. I know him. I know him. Um, quality of the guests has really gone downhill. The problem with that
Mm,
is it assumes we had any quality of guests to begin with. At any rate,
mm,
so uh, the all news is local, and so what ends up happening is we are geared to be kind of alarmist to any news that we hear because it's necessarily going to impact we know because we lived in communities that were small and local and so on and so
mm,
forth. Broadcast news and radio changed that. And so you could hear about things that was happening, and if you hear about a child that is murdered so I'm in Massachusetts. So if I hear about a child murdered in California, that's 3,000 miles
mm.
away. But my brain still treats it as if that's my next door neighbor. And I start to say, oh my God, what
Absolutely.
is this world coming to? Well, it's the same number of mass. And there was a funny thing because I just happened to be involved in with a group of people who were they were very Christian. I'd just been spending time with it, and there was a man in Florida who ate his neighbor's face. I guess the neighbor died. He went in, ate the face. Um,
Yes.
you
Oh, that was
remember that?
when they were on. I'm from Florida. I know. This is
Yeah.
that was the bath salts, dude. Man, these guys with the bath salts.
Oh, Jesus, that's
I
right.
don't know. They
That's
might
right.
be more than one time.
Yeah,
They're on
it
these
might be.
bath salts. So hopefully.
But they said, okay, this is a sign that the world is coming to an end. Why? Well, because somebody ate somebody else's face. It's the end times. It's the apocalypse. And I'm sitting there going, human life expectancy is higher than it's ever been. Happiness index is higher than it's ever been. We're healthier than we've ever been. We're living longer and freer lives because we don't have to wash our clothes all day, every day, because we have washing machines that can do it. And we've got all these
Mhm.
things that we can do and live our lives with. You want to talk about face eating? Talk about medieval Europe. Talk about the Dark Ages. Talk about when religion was in charge and face eating was at an all-time high, and people really did, actually, when they had class warfare, then what
Mm,
that meant was they'd grab a noble, they'd spit roast him, and they'd eat him alive. If not, well, other things that I'm not even going to get into, but
yeah. Whew.
at
Yeah.
any rate, yeah. So I was sitting there going like, but this alarmist, this kind of like, wow. And the fact is, really bizarre, crazy stuff happens in this country and across the world all the time. But if there's a good news cycle, if there's other things in the news, nobody. When you tell somebody that 40,000 people die a year in our highways, like that can't possibly be true. I didn't hear anything about it in the news. It's like, well, because they don't cover it unless there's no other news. And then they sit there and say there was a major accident here, 5 people killed, and you're like, oh my God, what's going on our highways? The same thing that was happening yesterday, the same thing that's happening tomorrow. Nothing's
Mm.
changed. So if you want to find clips that feed a specific narrative, if you just look for clips of black people beating up white people, there's plenty of clips to find. This is a very big country. I mean, I can find you a
Absolutely.
clip of a 5-year-old child shanking, shanking a grown man. It's like, watch out for them 5-year-olds. Okay. This is what 5-year-olds do if you're not paying attention. So that was a long. You see, you and I, we will have a verbosity contest, and just to see how. I don't know if anybody's going to want to see that, but we'll see who can. Um,
Well, you know what's
yeah.
interesting about that is like, and this is how they misuse data, right? So this is
Mhm.
I've gone over a little bit on my channel, but so with these debates, what they're going to do is every time they're going to go right to the murder number. They're going to say what blacks are what 10% of the population or something, 12, 13% of the population. They commit 65% of the murder, right?
Yep.
Now, what they're not telling you is right. So I took the time to look up some of these statistics, and it's a little hard to dig deeper, but I think it was in 2015 we had 15,000 murders. 10,000 of them were gang related, right? So then, if you think about this, our problem in this country is gang violence, right? This is where the
Yeah.
majority of these murders are coming from. Now, obviously, also, where are these gangs at? These gangs are in areas of poverty, like places that have areas they can thrive because of issues with people not being able to have good education systems, not be able to get the jobs they need, less development in those areas, right? So of
Mhm.
course people are going to turn to crime. But this even further misrepresents what they're saying, because really when we get into these murder rates, like it's certain cities in America,
Yep.
it's certain areas of cities,
It's
and
it's the
if you
liberal cities, Skylar. It's the
Yeah,
liberal
see,
cities.
that's
Why aren't you
exactly.
admitting that? Why won't you acknowledge that fact?
That was
I
something he
got you.
got
You're
real
owned.
pissed off about. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's funny. He's like, I tried to bring. I was like, yeah, the cities are always run by Democrats or liberals, and he was like, Vincent James did not want to hear that. He's like, I don't care why. I'm like, well, you should care why. Like,
uh,
I was like, cities typically vote more progressive. That's just the way it is because of it policy wise.
well, no,
But think about this. Yeah. Okay.
I am going to interrupt for one just quick thing, just because we had this when COVID started out. We were covering COVID. We're also a news channel, so we were covering COVID. And one of
Yeah.
the things I said when it started was because people were sitting there saying like it's not that big a deal or this or that. I was like, they're only saying that the ones who think it's a big deal are the liberals, and the ones who don't are the conservatives. Why? Viruses always hit liberals first. Liberals, when there's a pandemic,
Yes.
liberals are going to get hit first, and there's going to be a lag before conservatives get hit. Why? Since the dawn of time, cities have always been more liberal than urban areas, or sorry, than the suburbs. Yeah, anything out there, the greater the population density, the more liberal it's going to be, because you are necessarily exposed to a wider variety of people, wider range of ideas, and the only way to function is to learn to live with people you don't like. It's hard to be racist, homophobic. It's doable, but it's hard to be racist, homophobic,
Mhm.
or bigoted when you meet people and have to interact with people that are different than you each and every day, and you are somehow dependent on them. This naturally breaks down those kinds of barriers, and you end up with much more liberal people in the cities, which is where you're going to find higher rates of crime, where you're going to find higher rates of transmission of COVID. Yes, COVID is going to hit cities faster. Obviously, once you
Absolutely.
understand how the biology works, and cities are universally, since the dawn of the species, cities have always been more liberal. So COVID will hit liberals first. It has nothing to do with policies. It's not God getting upset with
Absolutely.
Democrats. It's not. It's none of that. But it does. That's how it works. That was just a thought, and I
No,
don't know that you.
absolutely.
That's just one that just dovetails into what you're, because it's like, okay, COVID doesn't care about how you vote, but it does hit Democrats first. Period.
No. Well, and that's the thing is when we're talking about all these statistics, and you're looking at, of course, cities are going to have higher crime, right? But what it really does is it paints this picture of black folks that isn't representative of the whole country. We have a giant country, right? And what it does is what it's counting is all black people in the whole country, everywhere they live. But what it's doing is saying, hey, it's saying, hey, but focus on this number because even though it's only in one particular area, in like places like Chicago, LA, Detroit, probably I think Chicago is going to be number one on there. Probably the majority probably is in like certain parts of Chicago, probably New York City or something. Then it's like by doing this, by focusing on these statistics, like people that are in cities where there are tons of black people, right, with nowhere near the murder rate because obviously it isn't a black issue. It's an issue with gangs, and these cities don't have the gangs like the big cities do, and we always want to detach. They don't ever want to talk about the. You'll notice I've caught this now with a lot of these race statistic right wing nuts is that what they don't want to talk about drug war, and they don't want to talk
Yeah.
about the drugs, and they don't want to talk about what fuels it, like why we have crimes have power. I mean, not crimes, gangs have power. The
Yeah.
same reason gangs have power here is the same reason Mexican cartels, drug cartels, have power in their country, and they were able to militarize. Is because we created a market through inequality, right? People finding ways to make money to survive, and we created a system where there was demand and we had plenty of supply going around of these things. And it's just such a deceptive thing. It absolutely drives me nuts the more I look at it.
I think. Well, first of all, I think that's. I think I like your example. I'll give another one, which is talking about black culture or blacks all inclusively that way is kind of like blaming me and all whites for Mitch McConnell. I mean, you know, he's but it's like you take a look at Mitch McConnell and you say that's all white guys. No, it's really not. But I think the oh shoot, now I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. We were talking about We've done the availability,
We're
war
talking
on
about like
drug. Oh yes, oh
logistics in
yeah.
the city.
Oh, here's the other thing about guns, and we talk about gun control a lot on this channel. We've had a couple of debates, a couple of just genuine, just hangout discussions. But I will say this: I understand, and I'm going to table for now some of the reasons like self-defense and so
Mm,
on for having a gun. But other than if you really have just an immediate, desperate need for a gun, the biggest reason I can think for owning a gun, and I don't say this tongue in cheek, and I'm not trying to be glib here, respect,
mm,
and a sense of self-respect and a sense of okay, now I'm somebody. And you join a gang, and you have a family, and you have people who will look out for you, people who will risk their lives for you in a way you're not going to get anywhere else. And if you're
mm,
poor, if you have no means of getting an income, you have people who will
mm,
help you get money one way or another. And when you're starving, and especially if you have kids or people you need to take care of, all of a sudden, what a gang offers is respect, power, family, a sense of purpose.
mm,
The reality is, you can see gang behavior everywhere in society. It's just how violent that
mm.
gang is depends on the amount of poverty involved. It's a
Yeah.
gang if it's it's a gang if it's in a poor community. If it's in the capital, it's called a caucus, but it's actually the same thing.
Some cities, it's like sports fans. Man, I was from Philadelphia originally. I mean, we
Mm,
used to have a prison or jail cell in the bottom of the Eagles Stadium because people would get so wild that they'd have to throw people in jail. They used to have a judge I heard down there.
yes.
I know they had a jail cell down there, but people like you would go like my cousin was a Bears fan. He's from Philadelphia, but his brother was a Eagles fan, and like they went and saw a Bears Eagle game, and Bears are winning, and they had to get out. They were like, "Yo, we got to get out of the stadium before like you're wearing a big Bears jersey. You're gonna people are drunk, they're fighting, but it can be anything can cause like some kind of
Yes.
camaraderie." That's a good point I think you're making about
Oh,
that.
oh,
It just
and
depends
I
on how far
love.
you take it.
Yes, sports fans, Red Sox and Yankees. And I'm in Massachusetts. I love the Sox. You know what? I like the Yankees too. I like any team that's good, and the Yankees are good. They don't suck. They don't Yankees suck. No, it's a good fucking team. And you'd have to
Mhm.
be out of your mind to sit there and say, they've earned it. But it's funny because, and I will remember this was. I mean, I've seen. I don't spend a lot of time at sporting events, and I've seen the mood at a party turn very dark if it's in Massachusetts and somebody
Mhm.
shows up with a Yankees. Oh my God! And I'm gonna tell you this. It's embarrassing. I was young, so I wanna just so for everybody. Yeah, I did something I'm not proud of. I've come to terms with it. Hopefully, people are gonna be adult about this. When I was younger, college age, I went to a meatloaf concert. I, it was the
Meatloaf was
Storytellers
a good
tour.
band.
What? It was
I
the
said they're a good
VH1.
band. They're a solid band, man.
Uh,
They're all right.
well, listen. If
I
Mouty's
don't
here,
listen to
any
them
any of my
regularly.
musician friends, if you admit that you went to a Meatloaf concert, it's like okay, you're done. Um, so, and
The
this was
Bad
around that.
L2 album was fantastic. It was a good
Yeah, and
album. The
well,
Bad
anything
Out
for love, but I
L2.
won't. I. It's an opera. He does opera stories in his. I mean, come on, Paradise by the Day. Okay, no, I'll shut up now. I'll shut up.
Yeah.
I'm a recovering meataholic. At any rate, um, so I was at a meat. It was at the Wang Center, biggest theater in Boston, and so It was Meatloaf Live, but it was the Storytellers tour, which I thought was brilliant. VH1 was doing this. I loved this. What this
Hmm.
was they would actually have them not just do a concert, they would tell stories, and that you wouldn't know what songs they'd sing it based on the stories that they talk about, and they would talk about the music, and it was. I loved it. I love all the storytellers things, but I saw storytellers live with Meatloaf, and he started talking, and there started to be this really bad commotion in the audience, and it started to get pretty loud, and people were starting to get upset. And at first I didn't see the problem. I saw the problem, and I realized there was a 50-50 I was going to be on the news for being in the crowd that murdered legendary singer Meatloaf. And he couldn't figure out the problem either, but he starts talking about wanting to sing, and people are starting to yell at the stage, and people are starting to, and like I think one small thing was thrown, but this crowd is getting fucking ugly, and they paid money to see him. So what's going on?
Mm.
And he's trying to figure it out, and he turns, and thank God he fucking figured it out. His drummer had a Yankees shirt on. And the audience, by the time he figured, I'm not fucking kidding. By the time he figured this out, the audience was starting to become really fucking belligerent, and it looked like somebody was going to climb on the stage. It looked like somebody was going to. I mean, the front. Oh, they were starting to move forward. He did the best fucking. So he. Okay, I'm starting to like. Mr. I'm not going to say his name, but I'm starting to like Titan there, because he knows the words. So at any rate, um, so he turns around, he sees his drummer, and he identifies the problem. He goes, "What? You did that here in this house? In this house?" He's shouting that to his drummer. And his drummer's like, "What the hell is going on, man?" And the crowd, all of a sudden, he turned the crowd around just like that. They're like, "Yeah!" And it was just this energy. But I was a little scared, I will be honest, because they weren't fucking kidding. He says, "You ain't gonna play with that." The drummer had to take the shirt off, and the concert was stopped until the drummer took the shirt off. He did the first 3 or 4 songs with the shirt off until another shirt came in. This is over a baseball team. And they all paid money to see him. They all love Meatloaf, and I was afraid it was going to get violent. It took me a while to figure out what the problem was. I was a little towards the back, so I didn't see the shirt. But once I found out what it was, I was like, "Oh fuck!" That's how bad it is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely, man. And that's sports. Like you can only imagine some of the stuff. Like, I remember, in Philadelphia, like which was supposed to be the city of brotherly love. That thing is so segregated. It was so segregated when I was growing up. Now I didn't live there long. My dad was military, so we moved around. But my family all lived up there, so we go and visit all the time. And I'm from Fishtown, Philadelphia, which is right next to Kensington, which is one of the worst areas up over there. And but man, it used to be like my neighborhood was an Irish neighborhood. I'm Irish, right? Like you would have an Irish neighborhood, a German neighborhood, black neighborhood, Italian neighborhood, Spanish neighborhood. I mean, that's just how it just was that. And if a family moved into another neighborhood, they were harassed, right? You were just literally harassed. They would break your windows of your car. Like they did not want people segregating, coming together. And this wasn't that long. Like we're talking way past the segregation days. We're talking in the 70s, the 80s, shit like that. It, there's this weird thing that I found where all of a sudden I think people just think that racism was like 200 years ago or something, like as if it really wasn't a thing. And like all of a sudden, like they don't realize that literally, like my grandparents' generation, and I'm only 41, right? But my grandparents' generation, those black folks in that time were literally in the South taught that they were inferior to white people. They didn't have any job opportunities on the same level. They had inferior education. Everything they had to work for was twice as hard, 3 times as hard, and like as if like we think like that's not going to have an effect on their children, right? And the way they raise their children, and then their children are going to raise children that it's going to have an effect on because it just doesn't disappear. And I swear people just push everything under the wall. We're not racist now. It's like, I don't know. Like, there's actually a lot of racism going on. It's actually scarier because, honestly, a couple of years ago, I had gotten to the point where I thought it was way better. Like, especially when Obama was president, not because Obama was president that I think that racism got it. I mean, that's a sign. It was a good sign that he won and became president. But, like, it just felt better. Like, it didn't feel like even having a black wife, having, black children, I didn't get it all the time, the racism. Because there was a time before that I definitely remember. Like I remember people going to sit down in a restaurant with my wife and getting stared. Both right. But by the way, from white people and black people, right? We've gotten racial treatment from
that
both sides. So,
In
but to
college, my
get
best friend dated a black woman for a little
right.
while, and that was the part that shocked me the most. Was he's just like, Nick, you wouldn't believe where I'm getting this from. I was like, oh well, it's like, no, you don't understand. It's like, he was having a harder time from white people than he was from yeah. I apologize for interrupting. Please continue.
I don't no, no, no. I could tell you. I mean, still to this day, the service that I'm going to have at a restaurant is depending on the amount of like balance there is, right? So if it's me and my wife, it's most likely going to be fine, right? Me and my wife, my children, we're fine, right? Now, me, my wife, and her mother, nope. It's going to be we're going to get shitty service. It's literally like an equation you can do. Just add white people to the mix, and then you'll figure
Wow.
out whether it's going to balance the shit out, basically. Right now, it's not all the time. I don't want people to think that like this is like every time we go, but I can tell you it's enough to where I've been like, this is kind of rude and this is terrible at the same time. But I can tell you that when it's if whenever I went to dinner with her and her parents, yeah, we were going to get treated terrible. We were going to get good service. Um, I mean, little things. I know, like, I mean, my wife gets pulled over. I mean, these are anecdotal type things, but I mean, my wife gets pulled over in her car far more than I do. I never get pulled over in my car. I think in the last 20 years, I've gotten pulled over. Well, I got pulled over twice. One, I was going 4 over the speed. It was just a speed trap. I just got caught, and that guy was giving me no mercy. I was even like, dude, I got a ticket in 10 years. He's like, yeah, I know. He's just like, no mercy. They were just there to catch people. I wasn't getting out of it. And the second time was because I was driving my wife's car and she forgot to renew her tags. So I got pulled over for no, and I got the damn ticket, even though it wasn't my car.
Oh
But
yeah,
like
throw your
her
wife under
though,
the bus. We all know what kind of guy you are now.
oh
Jesus.
no, I do blame her. She wasn't at fault.
Oh
She's
no,
a
the
terrible human
tags. I
being.
get it. Yeah, yeah. I think if it's the tags, you can blame her.
But I had to pay for it. She didn't even pay for that. I'm like, why
Oh,
didn't you do your tag? But literally, last 20 years, twice, right? Twice I've been pulled over by cops. And like there's been it's always just like, hey, what's going on? Let me put my white person voice on, like, hey officer, how are you today? Like straight up is it's like I'm just Whitey McWhite driving my car, my middle class home,
yeah.
nothing going on here. Don't look in the trunk to see if there's any weed or anything, but just it's everything's cool. Right. And that's the thing that always cracks me up is I hear people talking about like the drug statistics are the best, right? This is the way you want to really show bias in our police force. You can look that whites and black people use the same rate of drug use, but somehow blacks are so disproportionately arrested for it. I think about so many times in my life, not saying I did any of this stuff. I'm just saying hypothetically, if I were to have like
Hypothetically, if
cannabis in my car,
if a joint
right?
accidentally ended up in your hand and somehow caught on fire, if it was like the God came spontaneous
Yeah, like
combustion, yeah,
some
the burning
exactly.
bush, it's
Right,
the
yeah,
burning, yeah.
I think about just times if hypothetically I had it in my car and I got pulled, like I've just been pulled over, like how they would have, I could have been in trouble, right? Or got caught. But because there was just no suspicion there, it was like,
How many
you go on your way.
how many
Yeah.
times has your wife been pulled over?
What do you It's stupid. A couple times a year, at least, few,
Oh,
3, 4 times a year,
oh
constantly.
wow.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she's a bad driver. Sometimes I
Well,
wonder, but
so no, in New
she's.
York, it's a
But
well,
I
well,
think it's
those
more
aren't
her.
mutually exclusive, right? I mean, it could it could
Yeah,
be that you could have she could have both working against her. Well, yeah, in New York,
it could be.
the amount of cannabis use, if I recall, is equal amongst blacks and whites. However, blacks are 10 times more likely to actually get written up for it and or even go to jail for it, where whites 1/10 the number, if I recall. I may be wildly off. It's a high number. I think that was it. So
Oh yeah, it's pretty, yeah, it's ridiculous, and it's all over the country. Like some places is worse than others. They did used to do that. What was the stop and frisk in New York is what they had going
yeah,
on for a while. Luckily, I think they
yep.
found that unconstitutional because that's just
Oh, that's
a
insane.
blatant abuse of rights. Yeah.
I recommend two things. First of all, there's an amazing picture I saw of Barack Obama. Because here's the thing, you had Barack Obama, then you had Donald Trump. Donald Trump could not have been elected if he was black. That level of incompetency, you can't be black and be incompetent. Obama had to be 10 times
No.
better than just about any politician that came before him to get
Yeah.
elected. There's a great photo of Obama white, and somebody has done the greatest Photoshop job I've ever done. His skin is he looks naturally white. His hair is blonde. It's a little
Hmm.
spiky. It's just a little haunting. So I'm sitting there going, okay, that guy could have been elected to office 20 times easier Because I actually worked on the Obama
Yeah.
campaign, and I remember there were people who were openly about I'm not going to vote for him because he's black. I actually appreciated those people because two things. First of all, I was like, okay, it was a breath of fresh air that people would actually say that instead of you arguing for however long and trying to. And then the second thing was when they say that, what ends up happening too is that means I can drop them and go for someone who's more likely. I was like, if you really don't want him to get elected, anytime a campaign worker comes by, say, I'm thinking about it, and then just suck up their time as they try to convince you. I was like, I'm just moving on to somebody else. So that's the first one. The other one is there's the Moth radio hour. The Moth is on National Public Radio, and it's storytellers telling. Have you heard about the Moth? Do you know what the Moth is?
No, I don't think I've heard of it.
It's storytellers just telling, and it's an award-winning, especially since you love Audible. Go listen to the Moth Radio Hour. But the one that you want to find it's called Fishing on Delancey, and it is a journalist who did a ride-along with police officers in New York, and they're just sitting on Delancey looking for trouble, and they see a black guy on a bike with a white kid sitting kind of in the basket on the front and like, oh, something about that
Mhm.
looks suspicious. And then, they just pull the guy over and they start harassing him. They start giving him no answer he gives can possibly be. And it's just like, and he just describes what happens as it turns out that this guy was essentially a babysitter. He'd been asked he knew the family and the kid, knew the
Mm.
kid. And the kid was just like, not again. And they're like, what are you talking about? It was just like, he's my friend. Why do you guys keep doing this? And the officers aren't even listening. The officers are like, we don't even know what he's talking about, but they put him aside. They start grilling the guy. And he's just like, listen, you can call his mom. And you go, did I ask you about his mom? Did I ask you about his mom? And it's just, but the guy does it with wit and humor, but it's also just really, so it's called Fishing on Delancey. It's the reason I brought it up is because I don't remember if it was, I think it may have been on the sort of stop and frisk. They saw something that they thought was suspicious, and all that was suspicious was a black guy and a white kid, and they stopped him. They held him for looked like about a half hour, and in the end they had nothing. And even when I'll let you listen to it. It's Fishing on Delancey, the Moth Radio Hour. It's a 15-minute piece, but it's really good. So,
You know what's
yeah.
it made me think of this. I can tell you real quick. There's a really interesting. Actually, it made me think about something that happened to my wife one time. So when my daughter was born, so interesting enough. So my son and daughter are actually very different complexions. So my son is much darker, has typical like black features, I guess you would say, curly hair, darker hair, brown eyes. My daughter kind of came out blonde hair with hazel eyes like me. It's really blew my mind. I didn't think that was going to be possible. I really thought I was like, man, you're going to be blessed with the best suntan like my son, right? But she came out very much very light skinned, right, and looks
Mhm.
very much like me. Well, anyways, my mother and my sister are very close friends with my wife. They're family, of course. So they do everything together. They hang out. My sister's got kids, and they were all out shopping. And my wife my daughter was a baby, kind of like in one of those wraps, in the where it's the front, like the kind of like from the movie The Hangover, where the baby's inside and sitting there.
Yeah.
And so this person walks up to my wife and it's like, hey, like, how much do you charge? And she's like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, you're like the nanny, right? Like you're the help for the family here. And I was like, she's like, no, this is my baby. And it was like this awkward moment, but that's it made me think what you're saying. Like that's the kind of stuff that like happens in life. And I'm dying. My wife came on. Like I know it's you have to kind of just laugh this stuff off in a way. Like it's the only way you can deal with it in a sense, because if you take it too seriously, it'll eat you up inside. But I die laughing about it every time. Boy, there was something else I was going to tell you about. I'll come back later. Anyway,
Oh,
you were going
stop
to
and
go into something,
frisk,
but I thought
yeah,
that was
Delancey and all those. Well, so I
yeah.
wanna, maybe we'll probably start wrapping it up reasonably soon. But I did want to get to so what had happened with this with Vincent James. So there was a guy who was a German, this
German, yeah,
racist. I don't
ethno,
want to ethno.
what,
Yeah, he was
whatever they
okay.
call themselves,
Well, I don't. I, or
segregation.
Um, well, and I at one point said a neo-Nazi to someone, and I got corrected. Like, well, they're racist. That doesn't make them a neo-Nazi, and admittedly, that's true. But it's
No,
a fine distinction.
I,
I'm just sitting there going, I'm like, for the intents and purposes of this discussion, I think if they're into ethno states and if they're racist, I get to call them a neo-Nazi. I'm gonna plant that flag. I'm
yeah,
sorry. I know that may be equivocation, but
I did it. I called the guy
um,
a neo-Nazi. I said,
yeah.
"Dude, you're a Nazi." Yeah, I have no shame. So,
So um, you're on the show, so I think that goes without saying. But at any rate, so we uh, this essentially ostensibly a neo-Nazi. You get into it with him, and then he got introduced into the either the chat or the conversation. Vincent James got introduced through this, and then you invited. What were you thinking when you decided to bring him in to talk to him? Now, it seems at first you didn't necessarily think that he was going to be a
no.
racist, and but then you sat there and you kind of put two and two together and said, well, wait a minute. If he got brought in by this guy, maybe they're simpatico.
Yeah, you know what? I kind of had a feeling he was probably racist, but I was like, let me not jump to conclusions, right? I was like, let me just talk to the dude. Let me get a feeling for what he's gonna go after. I also wanted to play with him a little bit, right? Because I knew what his goal was. Whenever this is as someone who does a lot of debates, has been around the debate game for a long time.
Yeah.
I know tactics, and I can see when someone thinks they're going to come in. Like what he thought was that I was some amateur debater who wasn't going to be able to go toe to toe with him, and he was going to be able to come into a room, run game, have a bunch of footage that he can later on play on his channel, right? So I was like, okay. I noticed that first of all he's wearing a red hat with an elephant on it. So I'm like, oh, you're a Republican, you're a conservative.
Yeah, I
I've
saw that you.
also
I
I've
was
learned
impressed you
something.
picked up on that. I mean, you so just by what he was wearing, I mean, you were already doing recon on him from the second he came in.
Yeah, I've learned this game too. Is I'm not going to put all my cards on the table either, right? Because I consider myself a moderate, right? I do consider myself a centrist.
Yeah,
I voted for Republicans. I voted for Democrats. Uh, Typically now I vote for Democrats because they're the sane ones right now in politics. I don't agree with everything, but there's a reason. But anyways, I knew that what he was coming in for was to talk the race stuff, obviously, and to talk the race statistics. And I wanted to get a feel for like what's his knowledge level? What does he actually know? Right? Is he just memorized FBI statistics and that's all he's ever going to say? So that's why I went immediately into like, hey, oh, are you a conservative or are you a Republican? And I was a hardcore conservative at one point in my life. Like I was very like libertarian. I was a Ron Paul fan. Uh, Mostly because I was big anti-war, right? I didn't like all the wars that were going on with Bush and Obama, and I was really into to Ron Paul. But I learned conservatism. Like I was a conservative. I know what the principles are of it, and I always like to just test the waters. I want to see if these people are actually conservatives, or they're just like I said, right-wing social justice warriors. And that is what I figured out very quickly. When I asked him about trickle down economics, and he starts talking about immigration. I'm like, you
yeah.
know,
I said
something's not right here.
yeah, that was odd.
Right? He didn't think corporations should get tax cuts, and we should get taxed for the wealthy. I'm like, okay, you're not following any type of traditional Republican trickle down economics plans, right? And I could tell he like right when he said, "Oh, were you an Obama voter?" Like I was like, no, we're not going to play this game, right? I'm not going to tell you I voted for Obama or whether I didn't, right? Because then it becomes Obama versus Trump, and that's whataboutism. I'm not even going to get like we're talking particular policy, what's relevant now. But he certainly did have a narrative, and I just tried to exploit that narrative as much as possible before letting him get into it, right? And my thing is, I'll like just acknowledge the numbers now. So if someone brings up that FBI crime statistics, I'll be like, okay, let's just grant them, right? Tell me why. Tell me why. If you're basically arguing uh, black folks commit higher crime rates, I want to know why, right? And that's where you're
Yeah.
going to win the argument because now they're going to come up with bullshit reasons that aren't rational. Like they're going to fall apart as soon as you pick at them, and you're going to realize they didn't bother to study any deeper. They just wanted to make sure that they usually used to people just denying the fact with that a particular crime statistic
Yeah.
and then not going into it.
So $5 from Jake 4D. Jake, thank you very much. Well, I know it's Jake. Jake, I saw Jake in your live chat there too. So Jake, I think Jake hangs out around. But Jake 4D, $5. Shit trickles down, money trickles up. I don't think money trickles up per se. I think it's kind of sucked up with like just like huge industrial strength suction. So I don't see anything trickling about the argument I always make too that I agree. I want to be back to the 50s in terms of our economy and what you could have a single income earner that could pay for a house, get a car, and put a kid through college, put two kids through college with a single income earner in the 50s. The way we did that, 93% marginal tax rate on the wealthy, 93%. So it's amazing when conservatives come up to me and say, I want to go back to the 50s. I want that. And the way we should do that is by giving everybody these tax breaks so that it's like, look up what the marginal tax, they took, if you made over $1 million, they took 93% of your income. And guess what? The economy was just fine. The rich didn't sit there and say, I'm withdrawing myself from civilized society,
No.
And then Jessica
Well,
44, Jessica 44 for $2. Thank you for the show, guys. I have to go now. Thank you, Jessica, for the super chat. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Skylar, what were you going to say?
Oh no, that was that. Yeah, I know. I was just gonna say too. There was a lot of things going on then. I think part of it also is like obviously too. Right in the 50s was after World War II, and like most of the industrial world had kind of like was in rebuilding phase, like Germany, Europe, Japan, and we took it. We got to build all the factories. Like we had all the factories ready because of the military and stuff. We were building weapons, building bombs, and now we were able to transfer that into the automobile industry and kind of go in different directions. Plus, obviously, with the high tax rate, which is going to help, be able to fund things through government, like Eisenhower creating the highway system. The Republicans back then were full. They were reasonable. These were reasonable people. Eisenhower was a great Republican president in many aspects. But I think that like what happens now is like, first of all, people don't understand economics at all. Like that's what cracks me is that they're so focused on anti-immigration, right? And if they were really being honest, like they think it was really about the jobs, the economy, that they're arguing against it. Like we could, at least there would be a better argument, but it's not even really a job killer, immigration. So anyways, that's way off topic, but
yeah, I think we're going to have you back on to discuss some other social issues because I don't feel like you and I are going to have a lot to fucking grouse about. Maybe a lot of preaching to the choir, but who knows? I'm sure we'll find a few things where we're going to disagree. But so I think sort of for my final question to sort of maybe wrap this up a little bit. So after that discussion, which got pretty contentious and it was I think it was difficult. Knowing what you know about him and how it went down, if you could go back in time, would you bring him back on again if you were going to relive it the same way, not new information, but relive it the same way? What benefit do you think there was to having him on and having that engagement? Was there more benefit to doing it, or do you think that, that one I should have just avoided, and why?
Oh no, I would definitely do it again. I think I really embarrassed him, to be frank with you. And I can tell by the audience reaction, right? His fan reaction, right? You don't get, I want to say it's like when someone tells you they have a big dick, right? They probably don't, right? And that's the thing with like his audience. When you have his audience members saying, you lost, you suck, like and just using racist comments throughout there, like, there's no argument there. And I like that I exposed this guy as a fraud because I got to get him on morality, which he's not used to comfortable talking about, like talking about religion and stuff like that. And I was able to be like, listen, you're arguing against kids in cages because I don't know how, like, if you got to the part, there was a part where first he would deny things like kids being in cages. Like the Justice Department of Trump. Like I just made him sit there and watch the video. Right. And you know who else was there? All of his fans.
Oh yes.
Right. So they had to watch it. And like that's powerful. Like you're not going to get most likely you're not going to get barely any of them, right? But you just got to chip away at it. You got to start like it's just like when you're leaving religion, right? It starts with the little things like, wait a minute, well maybe I don't believe in hell, right? And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, hell doesn't make sense. If I don't believe in hell, maybe these other parts of the Bible don't make sense. And then eventually you're like, well, maybe there's a God, but there's no Bible. And then like eventually you just keep moving. So
Yeah.
my thing is like incremental change. Get them to at least acknowledge facts. Like if they're actually conservatives and they're just wrapped up in this mix where they're not really, they honestly think they're coming at it for genuine reasons because they're interested about crime or something. Like pick at it, right? And also, mock them like in a certain way. Once it goes bad, I'm not saying mock them right away, but once like behavior, like saying congratulations when you're married to a black woman, or
Yeah.
like when people start using racial terms and they won't denounce it, um, and a smile is on their face because they're loving it that people are being racist, like then just mock them. And it was funny because I'm surprised he stuck along. I really am, because I put that man in timeout a bunch of times. I was just like,
Yeah.
I clicked that button, and I don't like doing that, but that's how I could also tell he was upset, right? Because he kept waiting for that moment that he could get one over on me, and he
Yep.
never got it. He was never able to get it clearly. And now I told him, I was even willing to do a round two. I was like, we can do a round two if you want. Now he's completely ignoring me. And typically, I think what would have happened is if he thought he had done well on that show, he would have taken clips from my show. He would have reviewed them on his channel, and he would have talked all about it. He would have made me look as awful as I could. And, it would have got him lots of views and likes. But the fact that he hasn't done that, I think shows that he was embarrassed. And I think he got, I mean, the man did say that he would, kill a baby for Jesus at one point at the show. So it's pretty bad when you get him to say that. It kind of really throws their Christian morals through a freaking loop.
Yeah, and that is, when you would, I saw that trap that I liked and appreciated where you had said, about is it okay that you're married to a black woman? And his answer to that, by the way, was
Yeah.
interesting because it basically said, well, he's a Christian, so he has to think that and I forget what it was, but he actually didn't affirm it. He just refused to deny it. I was just like, whoa, oh, it's not okay in
Oh, I
his
don't think I
mind.
caught that.
Yeah, that
Oh,
was,
well, and there was a little comment too that he said, and I was like, and he quickly moved away from it. He says, "Well, it's only like 3% of the population or something." And I was like, "What?
yeah.
When was that relevant? Like, what's the amount of people?" And I kind of moved away from it. But he is very good at trying to control the conversation. And I don't recommend people go on to his hangout and try to deal with that, because he
Oh,
will
oh, no,
control what's going on if you don't know how to push
it's a
back.
style I really don't like to contend with, and that was
Yeah,
I had been listening to it, and I found myself getting very anxious at the way he was doing that, and I found myself getting because he
yeah,
projects a lot of this energy in trying to run people over and intimidate people into not having the discussion, and I don't waste my time or energy with that. Now, some people have to. I mean, there are people who are so you seem to you it didn't phase you in the slightest. You're just like, okay. I was like, but that's something that I'm just like, I can't engage with that. And the other thing is, I mean, I could potentially start to lose my temper, and I don't. Just like, nope, that's just a bad thing for me. So I was
you have to almost like quiet down. You almost have to be like, that's why I kept doing. I was like, calm down. And I would put him time out. I was like, relax for a second. We're just having a conversation. We're just talking, right? Because as soon as you lose your cool, then it really elevates that shit. And then
yep.
you look like the bad one. Even when I told him to eat a bag of something at the end, like I did it in a funny way. So that way I was still in control. And his audience was going, I never got so much joy in my life. Watching how mad his audience was that I kicked them out of the room and said goodbye in my own special way. So
Yeah,
it
especially
it was
you
great.
got the Skylar goodbye. So I remember it now. I think it was something to the effect of he said, "Oh yes, there are some people who are." So you said, "Is it okay that I married a black woman?" And he said, "Oh well, of course there are some people who do that." So it's the answer that he essentially gave was it was okay, as in it's not prohibited by law. That was kind of the answer. Go back and
Yes.
listen to it and tell me if he did this kind of cop out where it's like he didn't answer. What you asked really was, is it okay morally? And what he answered was, is it okay legally? and he made sure that he kind of made that distinction so that somebody listening to it could. You had a lot to do. Don't get me wrong. I mean, yeah, and you know this too. After every debate I've done, I get 100 people saying, "Why didn't you follow up on this?" or "Why didn't you follow up on that?" I was like, "Listen, you got
Oh
so many
yeah.
balls in the air. It's just like you do the ones you care."
Oh, it's so much. Well, and it's like, especially with someone like him,
Oh,
man, you like immediately, and that's why I would just be like, yo, stop. Like, you can't, you're not going to do this. We're not going to move away from what we're talking about. Like, it's always like he was instantly in defense mode because when I started, he realized that he couldn't answer my question on conservative ideas. Wanted to talk about me being Obama fan or being a leftist or something like that. And I wouldn't allow him to go there. I'm like, oh, you're not going to paint me like this. You're not going to get to paint me
yep.
in a corner. I'll talk policy with you. I'll talk, but I don't. What I've learned, I don't get into these left versus right talks anymore. What I do is I'm like, we'll talk policy, and if you want to talk what policies are for between the two parties, we can have discussions on those. You can tell me if you agree, because you can get people if they're reasonable people, and you can keep it out of Democrat, Republican, Trump versus whatever. Like you can get them to get a more reasonable, especially on stuff like healthcare or things that really may affect them. They may get a little bit more open with it if you can get him out of that mode, but it's hard. It's really
Yeah, and
hard. But
Titan said
someone with him,
this was
do.
he did a bad Gish Gallop. I mean, he did a really bad Gish Gallop. I mean, the whole thing was a Gish Gallop. He just tried to hit you with 300,000 stats instead of answering the actual question, and it was just sort of like, "Ooh, that's cute." Yeah, he was cute. Uh,
Well, at one point, remember, I don't know if you caught, there was a point where I was going to cut because I just didn't have the energy to do it. I want to cut like a video together of every time he claimed something and then he backed away from it and said, I didn't say that. Right? He said that like most of the murders are unsolved in
yeah,
this country.
he said murders.
And
He
then he,
absolutely said murder. You like play back the tape. I was like, I
and
don't
then
need
he's
to
like, I
play
didn't
back the
say
tape.
that.
I heard it.
And I'm like, dude, I was like, you certainly. Then it became like, and what kind of weird? And if I would have had time to really look at it, like, what kind of like article, like or study does a statistic that includes property crime and violent crime together,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like those seem like completely different categories. And why would you mix those up and like put them together as if like, well, if we put these together, it's a higher number that's unsolved. I'm just like,
Wait,
yeah, it's like it
well,
just really. I was like, I knew there was something shady behind it when I heard that number.
yeah. Well, I mean, the crime statistics for blacks are actually pretty shocking. If you take all of the black people who have committed a crime and all the people who haven't
Yes,
committed a crime, you have 100% of the black population.
that's exactly right.
That's
Yeah,
what he did. I'm sorry.
yeah,
That's what he did. Oh,
that's
all right.
right.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you so much, Skylar, for joining us today. So I'm gonna be in the Discord probably about a little less than 5 minutes after this. We've been dropping links to the Discord. If Skylar, if you don't have a link, I will give you one. I can send it to you in your DM, but it's also it's been dropped a couple times in the live chat. So, but I'll be there in the after show
yeah, I see it.
room in probably about 5 minutes. Skylar, is there anything else you wanted to tell people about where they can find you, what you're doing, what you got coming up that people wanna know about?
Yeah, I would just say, come and check out the show, Skylar Fiction Show. Just type Skylar Fiction in YouTube. You'll find it, or backslash YouTube, Skylar Fiction. Yeah, we just do discussions on theology. My co-host, Dr. Josh Bowen. If you're a big history fan, he's an Assyriologist, PhD in Assyriology, actually. He has a channel him and his wife run called Digital Hammurabi. It's amazing. It's very in depth. Um, he can speak Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic. The guy is too smart to be on my channel, but
Wow.
he's there every week. Yeah. Wait, oh, dude, he's brilliant. I don't know if you ever want to talk to someone really interesting. Uh, Dr. Josh Bowen is just incredible, absolutely incredible person. Uh, and he's helped my channel quite a bit to grow, and they're really growing fast over there. Him and his wife Megan. But my channel is what we call an entertainment channel. Okay, now we mix a lot of education. It's certainly rated R. Okay, it's certainly rated R. And sometimes what I tell people, especially if you're Christians, because we do have a lot of Christians on, is that get to know us a little bit, right? And we're very satirical. It's going to seem like maybe we're a little bit more mawkish about certain religions, but if you get to know us, you'll learn and appreciate us for what we do, because we give crap to everybody, and I think we can be very, very fair. And then I love the debate. I go on modern day debate all the time and have them. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Check us out. Check out Digital Hammurabi too. I think you'll dig it.
All right. Well, with that, again, our next show right now actually scheduled is, and I just Thursday. We are going to have On Writing at 9 p.m. I'll be discussing the drafting process. Then next week, What's Wrong with Religion with Greek Orthodox minister Anestis Georgiangelou, and then Wednesday, September 30th, Generations Theory, where we're going to be covering what generations theory is, what it has successfully predicted, what it says about the future, and where we stand. So, Skylar, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you all. If you've gotten to this point, please, that means hopefully you liked the show, so please like and subscribe. It really does help us out, and I look forward to catching up with all of you in about 5 minutes in the Discord.